My name is Natalie. I'm 27 years old, and in a few weeks I'll be getting married. I sat at my kitchen table looking at a sea of wedding invites right now. I look over the names to make sure I haven't overlooked someone significant. However, there is one name that I purposefully omitted off the list, my stepmother's. You may be wondering how I could have invited my stepmother to my own wedding, and I get that. It's a lengthy story, and this seems like a good moment to tell it. I was 5 years old when it all began. My entire life fell apart when my parents divorced. They informed me that I would alternate between the two of them while living with them. I felt it was fantastic at the time since I couldn't pick between my parents, and I loved them both. I didn't have to this way. At first, life following the divorce wasn't too horrible. My dad and I used to go these incredible road trips together. Since he was the owner of the company, he was free to take time off whenever he felt like it. We would get into his car and travel to other cities. I had a sense of adventure as a child, exploring new locations with my father at my side. Things were different, but nonetheless wonderful while I was with my mom. We would play with my dolls for hours, making up tales for each one, and frequently the house would fill with the aroma of freshly made cookies. Those were joyous times. I felt that both of my parents valued, loved, and wanted me. Then again, things were different. When I was 7 years old, my dad remarried. I recall the day Dad had me meet Sarah, who will soon become my stepmother. Her grin seemed to fill the entire room, and her beautiful blonde hair added to her beauty. First, everything was all right. Sarah treated me with kindness and real concern. When I was at Dad's place, she showed me how to braid my hair and assisted me with my homework. However, as time passed, something changed. Sarah desired to have children of her own, but she was unable to conceive. Even though I didn't realize it at the time, I can now see how it affected her. Sarah's perspective on me completely changed. She used to be nice and hospitable, but these days it felt like she hates me for being here. She seemed to despise me for being born at a time when she was unable to have children of her own. It was unclear to me at the time. When I was younger, I didn't know what had gone wrong for my stepmother to suddenly detest me so much. Sarah's attitude toward me simply grew worse over time. It seemed as though she had made up her mind to live for herself in the event that she was unable to have children of her own, and there was no place for me in that existence. After returning from my mother's, I began to notice changes. Dad and Sarah would be laid back and tanned, bursting with tales from their travels during my absence. I eventually lost the ability to contain myself. "Dad, why don't we go on trips like we used to?" He glanced at Sarah and appeared uneasy before responding. "Well, honey, things are different now. We also need to take Sarah's timetable into account. Natalie, you're old enough to understand that adults need their own time," Sarah said with a stern tone. "Avoid becoming self-centered." I had a slap-like feeling. Is it self-serving to want to hang out with my own father? It wasn't simply the travels, though. Everything changed when I was at my dad's place. Sarah had set new regulations for me, and they all appeared to be intended to keep me hidden from view. "Natalie," she would say, appearing to be quite nice, "how about you go play in your room? Adults are conversing." I attempted to protest at first, "But I want to be out here with you and Dad." Sarah would avert her gaze. "Your father and I require some peaceful time," is asking for too much. I would therefore withdraw to my room, feeling less like a daughter living with her own father and more like a prisoner. Every day, the list of taunts got longer and longer. Avoid making noise, talking too loudly, playing energetic activities, and laughing too loudly. It was worse than living in a library. I was giggling at a humorous TV show in the living room one day. With a crimson face, Sarah stormed in. She said, What did I tell you about being quiet? But I was just laughing. She interrupted me. What you were laughing at doesn't matter to me. I give you rules to obey in this house. Recognize. I nodded while stifling my emotions. Yes, Sarah. Good, she murmured as she turned to go. Now go to your room and stay there until dinner. Dad didn't appear to be aware of anything, or perhaps he was simply choosing not to notice it. He would ignore me whenever I tried to bring up the subject of how Sarah was treating me. "Noah, she's just getting used to it," he would remark. Give her time. However, time didn't improve anything. All it did was make Sarah more outspoken in her disdain for me. She would be critical of everything I did, including my diet and appearance. "Natalie, really, is there no way you can chew with your mouth shut and sit up straight? You seem to have grown up in a barn." I wanted to shout, to let her know that I was just a child and was doing the best I could. However, I was aware that it would be ineffective. Sarah felt that my entire being was a transgression. I therefore acquired the skills of being quiet, little, and unobtrusive. In my father's house, I turned like a ghost, shying away from noise and drawing attention to myself. I felt like I could breathe again when it was time to return to my mom's every 2 weeks. But I was always afraid of going back to Dad's place and seeing Sarah's icy looks and stern remarks. I was able to suppress my feelings for many years, but by the time I became 12, I was at my breaking point. After a particularly unpleasant interaction with Sarah, I sobbed and told Mom everything one day. With each phrase, Mom's expression became deeper as she listened. She erupted when I was done. I jumped when she cried. That thing. How dare she treat my daughter like this? Mom was talking to Dad on the phone before I could stop her. She has never sounded so irate to me. She spat into the phone. "Listen here, you spineless excuse for a father. If you don't get your wife under control, I swear I'll take you to court and make sure you never see Natalie again." I was feeling ill. I simply wanted things to be better, not worse, and this was not what I wanted. A few days later, when I went back to Dad's house, he sat me down for a serious talk. "Natalie," he began, his voice stern, "we need to discuss your behavior. Sarah has been nothing but good to you. She's trying her best to be a good stepmother, and all you do is complain." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But Dad, enough," he snapped. "Do you realize what you've done? Your mother is threatening to take away my visitation rights. Do you want that? Do you want to never see me again?" Tears welled up in my eyes. "No, of course not." Dad's voice softened a bit. "Then you need to stop this, Natalie. No more complaints about Sarah. She only wants what's best for you. If you keep this up, you'll end up tearing this family apart. Is that what you want?" I shook my head, unable to speak through my tears. As he left the room, I felt like my world had shattered. Not only had Dad not believed me, but he'd also made me feel like everything was my fault. I was the problem, not Sarah. From that day on, I stopped complaining. I decided to be the perfect stepdaughter, to do everything Sarah wanted, just so I wouldn't lose my dad. I became a shadow in the house, quiet and obedient. I had no say in anything, but at least I still got to see my father, even if he seemed more like a stranger with each passing day. Life at Mom's house was a different story. A few years after the divorce from Dad, Mom met Robert. He was kind, funny, and had a daughter of his own, Lily, who was a year younger than me. Over time, I fell in love with both of them. Robert never tried to replace my dad, but he was always there for me. He helped me with my homework, listened to my problems, and even taught me how to ride a bike, something Dad had always been too busy to do. Lily became the sister I never knew I wanted. We'd stay up late giggling and sharing secrets. She never made me feel like an outsider. As I got older, the contrast between my two homes became starker. At Dad's, I was a ghost, trying not to upset the delicate balance. At Mom's, I was Natalie, loud, funny, and loved. As I entered my teenage years, my needs naturally grew. Like any kid my age, I wanted the latest gadgets, a cool smartphone, a decent laptop for schoolwork. Dad, to his credit, seemed to understand this. He'd always been generous, and at first, he didn't hesitate to buy me what I needed. I remember the day he handed me my first smartphone, but my joy was short-lived. Sarah's disapproving frown said it all. Later that night, I overheard them arguing. "You're spoiling her, Tom," Sarah hissed. "Do you have any idea how much that phone cost?" "She needs it for school." Dad defended weakly. "Please, she needs it to post selfies and waste time on social media. You're throwing money away." From that day on, Sarah appointed herself as the family's financial guardian. She told Dad she'd help him save money when it came to my expenses. What this really meant was that she'd take control of everything. The next time I needed new clothes, Sarah insisted on handling it herself. What followed was a parade of second-hand clothes and shoes, all bought from discount websites or clearance sales. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against second-hand stuff, but Sarah took it to an extreme. More often than not, the clothes were ill-fitting, out of style, or just plain uncomfortable. But I didn't dare complain. I still remembered Dad's warning about tearing the family apart. The irony of it all, while I was forced to wear hand-me-downs, Sarah never skimped on herself. Her closet was a fashion magazine come to life. Designer shoes, branded bags, clothes from the latest collections. She'd spend hours preening in front of the mirror, adjusting her perfectly coordinated outfits. Things came to a head when I graduated high school. Dad had promised me a car, nothing fancy, just something to get me around. I was over the moon. Finally, a sign that he still cared, that he saw me as more than just an inconvenience in his new life. But Sarah, true to form, couldn't let it happen. The night before we were supposed to go car shopping, all hell broke loose. "A car?" Sarah shrieked. "Are you out of your mind, Tom? We can't afford it. Besides, I need a new car. Mine is almost 3 years old." I listened from my room, heart sinking with every word. I knew how this would end. Sure enough, the next morning, Dad came to me with that look on his face, the one that said he was about to disappoint me again. "Natalie, honey," he began, not meeting my eyes. "About the car, I saved him the trouble. It's okay, Dad. I understand. We can't afford it, right?" He looked relieved that he didn't have to say it himself. "Right. But hey, I promise I'll pay for any college you want to go to and your accommodation too. How's that sound?" I forced a smile. "Sounds great, Dad. Thanks." As he left my room, I heard Sarah's voice from downstairs. "Tom, dear, when are we going to look at that new Jeep?" I wanted, so I sat there in my room full of ill-fitting clothes, clutching my outdated phone, dreaming of a car I'd never get. I realized something. The material things weren't what hurt the most. It was what they represented. Every second-hand shirt, every denied request, every broken promise was just another way of saying, "You're not worth it." Natalie, when it came time to choose a college, I poured my heart into researching the best options. I finally found one that seemed perfect, great program, beautiful campus, and not too far from home. I was ecstatic when I got accepted, but as soon as Sarah saw the tuition fees, all hell broke loose. "Are you kidding me?" she screeched, face turning red. "This is highway robbery." Dad tried to calm her down. "No, Sarah, we did promise." "I don't care what we promised." Sarah interrupted, practically foaming at the mouth. We are not paying this much for her. A party for 4 years. She stormed off and returned with a handful of brochures. Here, she thrust them at Dad. These colleges are much more reasonable, and they're farther away. It'll teach her some independence. And just like that, my dreams were crushed again. I ended up at Sarah's choice of college. Cheaper, yes, but also far from everything and everyone I knew. Mom and Robert were thrilled when they heard I was going to college. They didn't know about the behind-the-scenes drama, and I didn't have the heart to tell them. Why burden them with my problems? Despite everything, I threw myself into my studies. I was determined to make the most of this opportunity, even if it wasn't exactly what I'd hoped for. I'd come home for holidays, splitting my time between Mom's welcoming house and Dad's. Well, Dad's house. It was during one of these breaks that everything finally came to a head. Sarah was having a birthday party, and to my surprise, Dad called and asked me to come. Sarah would love to see you, he said, though I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. I was skeptical, but a small part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, things were changing. So I agreed. I even bought Sarah a gift, a nice scarf I'd saved up for from my part-time job at college. When I arrived at the house, the party was in full swing. I took a deep breath and approached Sarah, gift in hand. "Happy birthday, Sarah," I said, forcing a smile. "I hope you like it." I never got to finish. Sarah's face contorted with rage. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I stammered, confused, but Dad said you wanted me to come. "Get out," she shrieked. "You're not welcome here. How dare you show up and ruin my party?" I stood there, frozen in shock. The room had gone silent, all eyes on us. Sarah snatched the gift from my hands and, without even looking at it, tossed it in a nearby trash can. "I don't want anything from you. You're not worthy to be here among my friends. Leave now." Tears stung my eyes as I turned and fled. I ran up to my old room, grabbing the few belongings I'd left there over the years. As I reached for the front door, I heard Sarah's laughter floating from the living room, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just publicly humiliated her stepdaughter and thrown away a heartfelt gift. I slammed the door behind me and walked away from that house for what I promised myself would be the last time. I went straight to Mom's, where I broke down and finally told her everything. All the years of mistreatment, the manipulation, the broken promises. Mom was furious, but more than that, she was heartbroken for me. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, holding me close. I had no idea. "I'm so sorry you went through all that alone." As I cried in my mother's arms, I felt a weird mix of sadness and relief. Sad for the relationship with my father that I'd probably never have, but relieved to finally be free from Sarah's toxic presence. The day after Sarah's birthday disaster, my phone rang. It was Dad. I almost didn't answer, but a part of me still hoped he'd apologize, that he'd finally see the truth. "Natalie," he said, his voice stern, "why did you leave Sarah's party so abruptly?" She was quite upset. My blood boiled. That's not what happened. She yelled at me in front of everyone and threw my gift in the trash. She kicked me out. There was a pause, then Dad's voice came back, cold and angry. "I can't believe you'd make up such lies about Sarah. Why are you trying to denigrate my wife? Call me when you're ready to apologize to Sarah." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, tears streaming down my face. That was the moment I realized I truly lost my father. The next few years were a blur. I threw myself into my studies, graduated college with honors, and landed a decent job. I saw Dad a handful of times, always on neutral ground. A cafe, a park, never at his house. About a year after graduation, I met Jason at work. He was a few years older, kind, funny, and most importantly, he saw me. Really saw me, not as an inconvenience or a burden, but as a person worthy of love and respect. 4 years flew by. Jason and I moved in together, adopted a cat named Muffin, and built a life filled with love and laughter. Then on a random Tuesday evening, as we were doing dishes after dinner, Jason turned to me and proposed. And just like that, I was engaged. As the initial excitement settled, the reality of wedding planning set in, which brings us back to where this story began, me surrounded by wedding invitations, grappling with the question of whether to invite Sarah. In the end, I decided to send an invitation to Dad alone. I couldn't bring myself to include Sarah, not after everything that had happened. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a mix of sadness and resolve. I was starting a new chapter in my life, and I wanted it to be free from the shadows of the past. A week after I sent out the invitations, my phone rang. It was Dad. I answered, expecting the usual awkward small talk. Instead, I got an earful of fury. "How dare you?" he bellowed, not even bothering with a hello. "How could you disrespect Sarah like this? You invited me to your wedding, but not her, after everything she's done for you." I couldn't help it. I laughed, a short, bitter laugh that seemed to shock Dad into silence. "Everything she's done for me," I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Dad, are you hearing yourself right now? She raised you for years," he shot back. "She put so much love and care into." Love and care. I interrupted, my calm finally snapping. "When, Dad? When did she ever show me love or care? Was it when she made me wear secondhand clothes while she bought designer outfits? Or when she convinced you not to buy me a car for college? Oh, I know. It must have been when she threw my birthday gift in the trash and kicked me out of her party." "Thank you very much, Robert." I hugged him and said, "Thank you." The nuptials were exquisite. Jason was waiting for me, his face beaming with affection, as Robert led me down the aisle. I saw Lily, my mother, and all of our relatives and friends grinning and shedding joyful tears. I realized then that I was right here with all the relatives I could ever need. I made the decision to share some wedding pictures on the internet a few days after the wedding, right before Jason and I left for our honeymoon. A nasty remark surfaced under one of the photos almost immediately. "Observe that," Sarah said in her response. Having a stranger escort her down the aisle while her father wasn't even invited. Disgusting. I was filled with a familiar rage as I continued to gaze at the message. However, Jason's fingers suddenly touched my shoulder. "You okay, Nat?" he said, his eyes showing worry. I glanced at my hubby before turning my gaze back to the phone. Sarah's remarks suddenly looked insignificant, trivial, and completely irrelevant. What do you know? Surprising myself with how much I meant it, I said, "I am okay. I'm better than okay, actually." I immediately banned Sarah's account without thinking twice. I hesitated for a second before blocking Dad's as well. It was time to permanently close that chapter of my life.
"I've decided that my mother will be moving in with us next week," Kevin declared, his eyes locking onto mine. I nearly choked on my coffee. "Excuse me? Without discussing it with me?" "We can't have her here," I rebutted, my voice trembling with a mix of shock and anger. Kevin leaned back, unfazed by my reaction. "It's not up for discussion, Jenna. Mom's been through a lot since Dad passed, and she needs our support." My heart raced as I processed his words. Elaine, Kevin's overbearing mother, moving in? The mere thought sent shivers down my spine. "But this is our home, Kevin. We should have talked about this first." He scoffed, dismissing my concerns with a wave of his hand. "Don't be dramatic. It's just temporary until she gets back on her feet." I bit my tongue, knowing from experience that arguing further would be futile. Kevin had made up his mind, and my opinion didn't matter. Still, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that this would be the beginning of a nightmare. As the days ticked by, the knot in my stomach tightened. I thought back to when Kevin and I first met, how charming and attentive he was. But over the years, that spark had faded, replaced by a growing indifference and a prioritization of his own needs over our relationship. The morning of Elaine's arrival, I braced myself. But nothing could have prepared me for the chaos that ensued. Movers poured in, hauling not just a few suitcases, but an entire household's worth of belongings. "What's all this?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the commotion. Elaine swept in, her presence as domineering as ever. "Well, dear, I couldn't possibly leave my precious belongings behind. This is just temporary, after all." I shot Kevin a pleading look, but he simply shrugged, already retreating into his usual detached state. As the movers began rearranging our living room to accommodate Elaine's furniture, I knew my life as I knew it was over. That evening, I called Megan, my best friend and confidant. Tears streamed down my face as I poured out my frustrations, feeling more alone than ever in my own home. "I don't know what to do, Meg," I confessed. "It's like Kevin doesn't even see me anymore. And now, with his mother here, I feel like an outsider." Megan's soothing voice offered little comfort. "You have to stand your ground, Jen. This is your home too, and you can't let them walk all over you." But as the days turned into weeks, Elaine's presence became increasingly suffocating. She took over my kitchen, rearranged my carefully curated decor, and inserted herself into every aspect of our lives. Meanwhile, Kevin's emotional distance grew, and he started spending more and more time away from home, leaving me to fend for myself against his mother's intrusions. With each passing day, Elaine's presence grew more oppressive, her tentacles snaking into every nook and cranny of our once peaceful home. No matter how hard I tried to establish boundaries, she bulldozed right through them, treating our space as her personal kingdom. "Jenna, dear, don't you think these curtains would look better over there?" she'd say, already rearranging my carefully chosen decor without waiting for a response. Kevin, true to form, remained oblivious to my mounting frustrations. Whenever I tried to broach the subject, he'd brush me off with a dismissive, "Mom's just settling in," or "She means well." Meanwhile, his absences from home became more frequent and prolonged. Business trips, he'd claim, but I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that something more sinister was afoot. One evening, as I pored over our bank statements, a disturbing pattern emerged. Large sums of money, thousands upon thousands, had been steadily disappearing from our joint accounts. My heart raced as I cross-referenced the dates with Kevin's supposed business trips. Desperate for answers, I reached out to an old acquaintance, Greg Wilson, a private investigator with a reputation for discretion. If Kevin was up to no good, Greg would uncover the truth. "I need you to tail my husband," I whispered into the phone, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. "I think he's hiding something from me." Greg agreed without hesitation, and the following weeks were a whirlwind of clandestine meetings and hushed conversations as he fed me crumbs of information. "Your husband's been frequenting some unsavory establishments," he reported one afternoon, sliding a manila envelope across the table. Inside were grainy photographs of Kevin entering a seedy-looking casino, his face obscured but his gait unmistakable. My world shattered in that moment, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. Kevin, the man I had once loved and trusted, was gambling away our savings, our future, all while letting his mother infiltrate and undermine our home. Confronting him was an exercise in futility. "You're overreacting, as usual," he sneered, his eyes cold and devoid of remorse. "If you can't accept the way things are, then maybe you should leave." The venom in his words stung, but I refused to back down. This was my life, my home, and I would be damned if I let him and his wretched mother take it all away from me. With trembling hands, I dialed Megan's number, my voice thick with unshed tears. "I need your help," I choked out. "Kevin, he's been lying to me, stealing from me, and his mother, she's taken over everything." Megan, bless her soul, didn't hesitate. "Pack a bag and come stay with me," she urged. "We'll figure this out together, I promise." As I stuffed my belongings into a suitcase, a newfound sense of determination washed over me. Kevin and Elaine had crossed a line, and they would pay for their betrayal. This was just the beginning. Elaine's domination of our home only intensified after I moved in with Megan. Like a malignant tumor, she metastasized into every corner, leaving no space untouched by her overbearing presence. "That woman has no boundaries," Megan fumed as I recounted the latest indignity. Elaine had redecorated our bedroom without permission, tossing out cherished mementos in favor of her gaudy knickknacks. I could only nod, the lump in my throat threatening to choke me. Kevin's betrayal cut deeper than any wound, but it was his mother's insidious meddling that twisted the knife. With each passing day, Kevin grew more distant, his visits to the house growing increasingly rare. When he did show up, it was like a ghost drifting through, offering little more than a cursory greeting before disappearing into the night. "Working late," he'd mumble, his eyes downcast, unable to meet my gaze. I knew better. Greg's surveillance had painted a clear picture. Kevin was frittering away our hard-earned savings at underground gambling dens, chasing a thrill that no amount of money could satisfy. Desperate to stem the bleeding, I took matters into my own hands. I changed the locks, froze our joint accounts, and even went so far as to cancel Kevin's credit cards. Anything to halt his reckless spending before he bled us dry. Elaine, of course, was apoplectic. "How dare you?" she shrieked, her voice shrill enough to shatter glass. "This is my son's home, and you have no right." For once, I stood my ground, emboldened by the knowledge that I held the moral high ground. "Your son has been lying and stealing from me," I spat back, my words laced with venom. "If he wants back in, he'll have to earn it." Kevin's response was predictable, a flurry of anger and denial, punctuated by the occasional guilt trip. "You're overreacting as always," he sneered. "If you loved me, you'd trust me." But I was done being manipulated. With Megan's unwavering support, I dug in my heels, determined to uncover the full extent of his misdeeds. It was a war of attrition, with Elaine and Kevin launching salvo after salvo of emotional and psychological attacks. But I was no longer the meek, deferential wife they thought they knew. This was my life, my home, and I would fight tooth and nail to protect it. Each night, as I lay awake in Megan's spare room, my mind raced with possibilities. How far had Kevin's deception gone? What other secrets lurked beneath the surface? And, perhaps most pressing of all, how could I make them pay for their betrayal? Revenge, once a fleeting thought, had now taken root, a burning ember that I stoked with each fresh indignity. Kevin and Elaine had awoken a fury within me, and by God, they would reap the whirlwind. As the weeks dragged on, my suspicions about Kevin's financial misdeeds only deepened. Despite my efforts to cut off his access to funds, he always seemed to have a steady stream of cash flowing in, money that couldn't be explained by his legitimate income alone. It was Megan who first pointed out the discrepancies. "Look at this," she said, her brow furrowed as she pored over the bank statements I'd managed to obtain. "These deposits don't add up. There's no way he could be earning this much from his job alone." My heart sank as the realization hit me. Kevin was up to something far more nefarious than mere gambling. He was embezzling, siphoning off money from who knows where to fund his vices and Elaine's extravagant lifestyle. With Megan's help, I dug deeper, combing through financial records and piecing together a paper trail that painted an increasingly damning picture. Kevin had been skimming funds from his company's accounts, using his position as a trusted manager to cover his tracks. The evidence was mounting, but I needed more. I needed irrefutable proof, something that would hold up in court and ensure that Kevin and his wretched mother couldn't weasel their way out of facing the consequences. That's when I turned to Greg again. "I need you to follow the money trail," I instructed, my voice steely with determination. "Whatever it takes, we need to know where these funds are coming from and where they're going." Greg didn't disappoint. Through a combination of surveillance and good old-fashioned gumshoe work, he uncovered a web of deceit so intricate, so meticulously constructed, that it left me reeling. Kevin, it seemed, had been running a complex embezzlement scheme for years, funneling money into offshore accounts and using shell corporations to launder the ill-gotten gains. And at the center of it all was Elaine, the puppet master pulling the strings, using her son's greed and her own manipulative ways to bankroll their lavish lifestyle. As the pieces fell into place, a white-hot fury burned within me. These people, the ones who were supposed to be my family, had betrayed me in the most despicable way imaginable. They had stolen from me, lied to me, and tried to strip me of my dignity and self-worth. But not anymore. Clutching the thick dossier of evidence that Greg had compiled, I steeled myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. Kevin and Elaine thought they had me backed into a corner, but they were about to learn just how wrong they were. When they arrived at Megan's apartment, their usual arrogance was on full display. Elaine swept in first, her nose turned up in disdain, while Kevin trailed behind, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence. Elaine sneered, her eyes narrowing as she took in my defiant stance. Kevin, ever the smooth talker, tried a different tack. Jenna, please, let's be reasonable here. This has all been a big misunderstanding. I said nothing, simply tossing the dossier onto the coffee table with a loud thud. Reasonable? You want to talk about being reasonable? I spat, my voice dripping with contempt. How about you explain these? As they leafed through the damning evidence, their smug expressions melted away, replaced by a mixture of fear and outrage. For once, they were the ones left speechless, their carefully constructed lies unraveling before their very eyes. The satisfaction I felt in that moment was overwhelming. Finally, after months of torment and gaslighting, the tables had turned. Kevin and Elaine were the ones backed into a corner, their misdeeds laid bare for all to see, and I was just getting started. The look of stunned disbelief on Kevin and Elaine's faces was almost comical if the situation hadn't been so deadly serious. As they flipped through the damning evidence, their mouths agape, I could practically see the gears turning in their twisted minds, desperately searching for a way to wriggle out of this mess they'd created. But there would be no escape. Not this time. I had them dead to rights, their web of lies and deceit exposed for all to see. How did you get this? Kevin stammered, his usual smooth demeanor cracking under the weight of the truth. I fixed him with a steely gaze, reveling in his discomfort. Does it matter? The real question is, what are you going to do about it? Elaine, ever the master manipulator, tried a different tack. Jenna, darling, surely we can work something out, she cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. This is all just a big misunderstanding. I scoffed, my fury rising like a tidal wave. A misunderstanding? You really expect me to believe that? I spat, gesturing to the damning evidence laid out before us. You've been bleeding me dry for years, living off my hard-earned money while treating me like a doormat in my own home. Kevin's eyes narrowed, his mask of charm melting away to reveal the true monster beneath. Watch your tone, he snarled, his voice low and menacing. You're the one who's been making things difficult, constantly questioning my decisions and undermining my authority. The sheer audacity of his words left me momentarily speechless. Undermining his authority? As if he had any right to wield authority over me, after the way he'd betrayed me time and time again. Megan, bless her soul, stepped in before I could unleash the full force of my fury. I think it's time for you two to leave, she said firmly, her gaze fixed on Kevin and Elaine with barely contained contempt. Elaine opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off with a sharp gesture. No, let them stay, I said, my voice laced with a cold, calculated anger. I want them to hear this. Taking a deep breath, I laid it all out, every sordid detail, every lie, every act of theft and betrayal. I spared no punches, letting the full weight of their misdeeds crash down upon them like a tidal wave. As I spoke, I could see the smug arrogance slipping from their faces, replaced by a dawning realization that this time they had gone too far. This time, there would be consequences. So here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steely and unwavering. You're going to pack up your things and get out of my house. Every last penny you've stolen will be repaid, with interest. And if you so much as breathe a word of protest, I'll make sure the authorities get a nice, neat package detailing every illegal thing you've done. Silence hung heavy in the air, the weight of my ultimatum sinking in. For a brief moment, I thought Kevin might try to bluster his way out, to hurl threats and insults in a desperate bid to regain control. But then, in a move that surprised us all, Elaine deflated, the fight draining from her eyes. Fine, she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. We'll go. Kevin, ever the dutiful son, followed her lead, his shoulders slumped in defeat. As they gathered their belongings and shuffled out the door, I felt a surge of triumph unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I had won. Against all odds, I had faced down the very people who had tried to destroy me, and I had emerged victorious. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. Kevin and Elaine would face the full consequences of their actions. Of that, I was certain. And as for me, well, I was just getting started. With Kevin and Elaine gone, a weight lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely, unburdened by their toxic presence, but my work was far from over. I needed to ensure they faced the full consequences of their actions. Megan, ever the loyal friend, was by my side every step of the way. "We need to gather allies," she said, her brow furrowed in determination. "People who can corroborate your story, who can testify to Kevin's misdeeds." It was a tall order, but Megan was right. If we were going to take down Kevin and Elaine, we needed strength in numbers. And so we began reaching out to anyone who might have witnessed their duplicity firsthand. To my surprise, the responses poured in, a steady stream of people eager to share their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of my former in-laws. Kevin's coworkers, friends, even distant relatives, all had tales to tell of his arrogance, his greed, and his utter disregard for anyone but himself and his precious mother. As the accounts mounted, a picture began to emerge, one of a man so consumed by his own ambition and entitlement that he would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, trampling over anyone who dared stand in his way. With each new revelation, my resolve hardened. These people, these victims, deserved justice as much as I did, and I would be the one to deliver it, no matter the cost. The plan was simple, yet audacious. We would gather our allies, our evidence, and our collective fury and unleash it all in one fell swoop. A public spectacle, a reckoning of sorts, where Kevin and Elaine would be forced to confront the full weight of their misdeeds. The opportunity presented itself in the form of a company gala, a lavish affair that Kevin had once reveled in, strutting about like a peacock in his designer suits and basking in the admiration of his peers. This time, however, the tables would be turned. As the guests arrived, dressed to the nines and sipping champagne, a palpable buzz of anticipation hung in the air. They knew something was afoot, but few could have predicted the bombshell that was about to drop. When the moment was right, I took the stage, my heart pounding in my chest. With Megan and our assembled allies flanking me, I laid it all bare. The lies, the deceit, the embezzlement, and the emotional torment that Kevin and Elaine had inflicted upon us all. The reaction was instant and visceral. Gasps of shock and horror rippled through the crowd, punctuated by the occasional cry of outrage. As I spoke, presenting the meticulously collected evidence, I could see the realization dawning on their faces. The man they had once admired, the man they had trusted, was nothing more than a fraud, a snake in the grass. And then, like a coup de grace, I unveiled the final piece of the puzzle. Video footage, obtained through Megan's resourcefulness, of Kevin and Elaine brazenly spending their ill-gotten gains on lavish vacations and extravagant purchases, all while pretending to be pillars of the community. The silence that followed was deafening, a collective intake of breath as the full scope of their betrayal sank in. And in that moment, I knew we had won. Kevin and Elaine, their faces twisted into masks of rage and humiliation, could do nothing but slink away, their reputations in tatters, their carefully constructed facade crumbling around them. As the dust settled and the crowd dispersed, murmuring in disbelief, I felt a sense of profound catharsis wash over me. The path ahead would be long and arduous, but for the first time in years, I could see a light at the end of the tunnel. Kevin and Elaine would face the legal consequences of their actions, of that I was certain. But more importantly, they would never again be able to inflict their poison on anyone else. Their reign of terror was over, and I, Jenna Taylor, had been the one to bring them to their knees. It was a victory hard won, but oh how sweet it tasted. The fallout from the disastrous gala was swift and merciless. Within days, Kevin had been unceremoniously fired from his cushy corporate job, his reputation in tatters. Elaine, too, found herself cast out from the social circles she had once lorded over, her name now synonymous with greed and deceit. As for me, I watched their downfall with a mixture of satisfaction and grim determination. This was just the beginning. the first step in holding them accountable for the pain and suffering they had inflicted upon me and so many others. With the evidence we had painstakingly gathered, it was only a matter of time before the legal system caught up to them. My lawyer, a bulldog of a woman named Samantha, wasted no time in filing charges for embezzlement, fraud, and a host of other white-collar crimes. "They'll try to wriggle their way out of this, you know," Samantha warned me, her steely gaze fixed on the mountain of documentation before us. "People like them always do. They'll plead ignorance, shift blame, anything to avoid taking responsibility." I nodded grimly, my jaw set. "Then we'll be ready. We'll make sure they can't escape the consequences of their actions, not this time." True to Samantha's prediction, Kevin and Elaine fought like cornered animals, deploying every legal maneuver and underhanded tactic in their arsenal. But we were prepared, our case airtight and our resolve unshakable. As the legal proceedings dragged on, I took a perverse pleasure in watching their once lavish lifestyle crumble around them. The fancy cars, the designer clothes, the ostentatious jewelry, all of it was slowly stripped away, piece by piece, as their assets were seized and their ill-gotten gains clawed back. Elaine, in particular, seemed to take the loss of her material trappings the hardest. I'll never forget the look of abject horror on her face as the movers carted away her precious antiques and curios, the very things she had prioritized over basic human decency. "You'll pay for this, you ungrateful wretch," she screeched at me, her eyes wild and her perfectly coiffed hair askew. "You've ruined us, destroyed everything we built." I met her vitriol with a steely calm unbowed by her theatrics. "You did this to yourselves," I replied, my voice level. All I did was expose the truth. Kevin, ever the more composed of the two, tried a different tack. In the rare moments when we found ourselves face to face, he would adopt a sickly sweet tone, his words dripping with false sincerity. "Jenna, please, let's put all this nastiness behind us," he would implore, his eyes pleading. "We're family, after all. Surely we can work something out for old time's sake." But I was no longer the naive, easily manipulated woman he had once known. The scales had fallen from my eyes, and I saw him for what he truly was, a snake, a parasite who had fed off my kindness and trust for far too long. "Save your breath, Kevin," I would reply, my voice laced with contempt. "The only thing we have to work out is how much time you'll be serving." And serve time he did, along with his precious mother. As the legal proceedings reached their climax, the weight of the evidence proved too overwhelming to ignore. Kevin was slapped with a lengthy prison sentence for his financial crimes, while Elaine received a hefty fine and probation for her role in the scheme. As they were led away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but feel a sense of vindication. For too long, these people had operated with impunity, trampling over anyone who dared stand in their way. But no more. They had finally been brought to heel, their lofty airs and delusions of grandeur shattered. It was a bittersweet victory, to be sure. The scars they had inflicted upon me would never fully heal, and the months of anguish and betrayal could never be undone. But in that moment, as I watched them being hauled off to face the consequences of their actions, I knew that I had emerged from this ordeal stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever before. Kevin and Elaine had tried to break me, but in the end, it was I who had broken them. With Kevin and Elaine finally behind bars, a weight lifted from my shoulders. The long, arduous battle had taken its toll, but I had emerged victorious. Battered, perhaps, but unbroken. As I stood in the spacious living room of my new apartment, surveying the sleek minimalist decor, I couldn't help but marvel at how far I'd come. This fresh start, this sanctuary of my own making, was a testament to my resilience, a tangible reminder that I had reclaimed control of my life. The road here had been paved with hardship and heartache, but also with the unwavering support of those who truly mattered. Megan, my rock through it all, had been by my side every step of the way, offering her steadfast friendship and sage advice whenever the doubts crept in. And then there was Scarlett, my cousin, whose generosity had made this new beginning possible. When she'd heard of my plight, she hadn't hesitated to offer me the keys to this stunning high-rise apartment, a sanctuary far removed from the toxic memories of my former life. "Consider it a fresh start," she had insisted, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and concern. "You've been through hell, Jenna. It's time you had a place of your own, a place where you can heal and rebuild. As I unpacked the final box, carefully arranging my cherished mementos on the sleek shelves, I couldn't help but reflect on the long, winding path that had brought me here. The betrayal, the anguish, the all-consuming fury, it had all been worth it, if only to arrive at this moment of hard-won peace. Of course, not everyone had been so fortunate. Kevin and Elaine, those architects of my suffering, were now behind bars, their grand delusions of wealth and status reduced to a distant memory. From what I'd heard through the grapevine, their fall from grace had been steep and unforgiving. Kevin, once the smooth-talking corporate climber, had been reduced to a hollow shell of a man, his bravado evaporating in the harsh reality of prison life. Elaine, too, had found herself adrift, her once formidable social standing decimated by the revelations of her misdeeds. A small, petty part of me relished in their misery, reveled in the knowledge that they were finally getting a taste of the pain and humiliation they had so callously inflicted upon me and others. But as the days turned into weeks, that vindictive urge faded, replaced by a sense of weary acceptance. They had been the masters of their own undoing, their greed and hubris ultimately proving to be their downfall. As for me, I had emerged from the crucible tempered and anew, ready to forge a life truly worth living. The housewarming party that Megan had insisted on throwing was a testament to just how far I'd come. As I surveyed the gathered crowd of friends, old and new, I was struck by the outpouring of love and support. "To Jenna," Megan declared, raising her glass in a toast, "the strongest, most resilient woman I know. You've been through hell and back, but you never gave up. You never let the bastards grind you down." A chorus of cheers and laughter erupted, buoying my spirits and filling me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. These people, these wonderful, caring individuals, were my true family, the ones who had stood by me when the chips were down, who had believed in me even when I had doubted myself. As the night wore on and the laughter and conversation flowed, I found myself reflecting on the long, winding journey that had brought me to this moment. The pain, the heartache, the soul-crushing betrayal, it had all been a crucible, a trial by fire that had forged me into the woman I was today. And as I looked around at the smiling faces of my friends, my chosen family, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I would face them head-on, unbowed and unbroken. For I was Jenna Taylor, survivor and warrior, and my story was just beginning.
In high school, I endured constant teasing from a beautiful classmate who would mock me as a nerd. Even now, she continues to insult me, calling me ugly. Irritated by her disrespect towards my cherished partner, I felt it might be time to set her straight. As I pondered this, a tap on my shoulder interrupted my thoughts. Sorry for the delay, a familiar voice spoke. Turning around, I was greeted by the sight of my beloved wife. The classmate's expression changed the moment she witnessed this encounter, marking the start of her downfall. I'm Mitch, the owner of a local cafe. Operating this cafe has been my lifelong dream. Though small in size, we prioritize using high-quality ingredients in every dish, which has earned us recognition in magazines. I'm also meticulous about our coffee beans, often traveling to source them directly. This dedication has sparked disbelief from some friends, but gained the respect of others in the industry. I've even honed my latte art skills, recently winning a competition, a testament to my expertise. "Mitch, how's the cafe faring lately?" a friend inquired. "It's doing well," I responded. "How about you?" I asked. "I'm doing great too. Can I stop by your cafe sometime?" they inquired. "Absolutely. We're excited for your visit," I replied. I'm grateful for the support. The accomplishment of my cafe is greatly attributed to my wife, Kay. She balances domestic duties with her demanding work. "Oh, what a lovely plant," I commented, admiring the new addition to our home. "Yes, greenery has a calming effect, and this one complements our space, so I had to get it," she explained. "Looks nice, doesn't it?" "Yeah, I believe it's wonderful," I concurred. Our home is well maintained thanks to her. Kay's taste is exceptional, and her designs could easily become viral sensations on social media. She's not just decorated our home, but also the cafe. Owing to her efforts, both have an elegant and refined look. I lack a discerning aesthetic sense, so I'm grateful for her guidance. Your taste is incredible, I told her. Thanks, it's part of the job, she replied. I can't express my gratitude enough, I added. However, despite her seemingly flawless talents, Kay has one major shortcoming. She can't cook. Mitch, the toast is ready, she said one morning. Great. Let's top it with slices of avocado and serve it with homemade consomme soup, I suggested. That's amazing. I could never do that. My avocados always turn out bad, and the soup ends up black, she admitted. Kay has a fatal lack of culinary skills. To this day, she can only manage to make toast and a honeymoon salad. She used to try cooking for me in the past, but it never went well. I noticed a lot of smoke coming from the kitchen, I said when she tried to fry an egg. You're supposed to crack the eggs first before cooking them. And based on the amount of smoke, it seems you didn't use any oil, did you? She had put the whole eggs in the pan, nearly causing a fire with the high heat. Another time, she tried making boiled eggs in the microwave. What's that loud noise? I asked. Did you just put the eggs in the microwave like that? Yeah, she replied sheepishly. You can cook boiled eggs in the microwave, but if you don't crack them first, they'll explode, I explained. She also attempted to make chicken noodle soup, but it turned into a dark, murky liquid. I did my best to salvage her cooking efforts, but most of it was beyond repair. I guess I'm just not good at cooking, she eventually admitted, giving up on her culinary skills. Mitch, you're amazing. You can create such stylish and nutritious dishes, she said. Thanks, but Kay, you're amazing too. Even though you may not be a talented cook, everything else about you is perfect. The place really has a lovely, welcoming atmosphere. While my aesthetic sensibilities may differ from yours, I'm sure you've done a fantastic job creating such a warm and inviting living space, I expressed with sincerity. Although I may not be an expert in the kitchen, I can prepare delightful and nutritious meals. Although my fashion sense may not be the strongest, Kay has a talent for making our home look beautiful. We support each other in this way and live peacefully. One day, I received an invitation to a high school reunion. Oh, really? I said, reading the letter. The reunion committee consisted of my former classmates, and the organizer was Ashley, a person I never got along with. Ashley was a pageant winner who always looked down on others. I never had a good impression of her and tried to keep my distance. In high school, I was less refined, often laughed at, and called a failure. Hanging out with a failure again? That's the worst. Stay away from me, she would say. I don't like it either, I'd reply, but she would laugh at me. Despite my efforts to avoid her, we were in the same class for 3 years with seats near each other, so I was constantly ridiculed. It was difficult, but my friends, especially my best friend Kevin, stood up for me. What's the matter, Jess? You seem troubled, Kay inquired with concern. It's about the upcoming high school reunion, I confessed. Truthfully, I wasn't thrilled about attending an event organized by Ashley and her group. However, I had formed meaningful connections with many other former classmates, and I was eager to reconnect with them after all these years. If you're hesitant, you don't have to interact with the organizers. Just focus on the people you care about, Kay suggested reassuringly. Motivated by her support, I decided to go and let them know of my plans. I'll be here to pick you up afterwards, so feel free to relax and have a good time, Kay added with a kind smile. I reciprocated the gesture, saying, Thanks, I'm looking forward to it now. Jess, I hope you have a wonderful time. Her words of encouragement filled me with anticipation for the reunion. Greetings, Mitch. There you are, my old friend. Come join us over here. Mitch, it's been ages. We've missed you dearly. As I arrived at the event venue that day, several familiar faces from our high school days warmly welcomed me. Kevin was among them, Of course. It's truly been too long, Mitch. We've all been keeping well, though you've definitely acquired a sun-kissed glow from your time abroad. Indeed, you've developed quite a fashionable flair, my friend. It's remarkable to see how we've all evolved since those carefree school days. Yet, once we started catching up, it felt as if no time had passed at all. I momentarily forgot my concerns about the event's organization and simply reveled in the joy of reconnecting with dear old friends. Thanks to Kay's encouragement, I'm glad I made the effort to attend. Greetings, everyone. So good to see you all again. And here comes the guest of honor, the pageant winner herself, Ashley. Her boisterous arrival and striking appearance immediately commanded the attention of the entire venue. Nice to see you, Kay. And Ashley, you're looking as radiant as ever. A group of our former classmates, dressed in a similarly flamboyant manner, gathered around Ashley, almost like a devoted entourage. Kevin, that comparison to Kim Kardashian and her enthusiastic fans is a bit harsh, don't you think? The little critters that gather around it never cease to amaze us. You really do tend to go overboard with your analogies, don't you? Our companions giggled softly, listening to our chat. Ashley peeked in our direction. You people are perpetually so dreary and drag down the atmosphere, as per usual. The women looked down on us, dismissing our worth. I bet you're all still unimpressive. Your partners must be unattractive, if you even have any. You're probably still lurking on the fringes of society, they sneered. That's right. They've been sidelined at work, or maybe they're just unemployed hermits. We shouldn't get too close to them, they continued. They said whatever they pleased about us. I glanced at Kevin's frowning face. Unimpressive. I wonder what they're basing that on. Before criticizing others, they should take a hard look at themselves, I muttered. We're not even interested in you in the first place, Kevin whispered, his voice barely audible to them. Unlike in high school, where he would have responded and faced their glares, Kevin seemed to have matured and chosen not to engage. After they had their fill of badmouthing us, Ashley and her group found a new target and left. They're gone now. It's always the same with them. Just put-downs and show-off behavior, I said. Ashley's glamorous beauty was still apparent, and it only seemed to have grown more captivating over time. Look at this, my fabulous life. She posted loudly on social media, her boasting clearly audible. Regardless of our desires, she claimed to have various benefactors who funded her way of life. Given Ashley's striking appearance, it's not surprising, she added. Thanks to them, I can live comfortably without toiling like the rest of us, she boasted. For those of us who strive through diligence, her remarks seemed like they belonged in a different realm. It's as if she inhabits a separate world, we remarked. We want no part of that, do we? Suddenly, the conversation shifted as one of us mentioned finding something Kevin had previously discussed. Don't do it. I'd be mortified if someone I know purchased it, they exclaimed. Quickly, we returned to our own engrossing dialogue, more invested in our own topics than her extravagant claims. This is my partner, she said proudly. Wow, he's quite a looker. Someone like him is the perfect match for you, I responded in awe. Let's see your significant other as well, she insisted. I feel a bit awkward following Ashley's impressive partner, I admitted sheepishly. Oh, he looks lovely, doesn't he? She commented. Thanks. By the way, didn't you mention you recently found a boyfriend? I inquired. Yes, I'd love to introduce you. Go on, show us, she urged. Ashley and the others were excitedly sharing pictures of their beloved companions, clearly enjoying the moment. Hey, let's summon our spouses over, someone suggested. Why not? My guy said he'd join us if I called, another replied. Really? Ashley's handsome fiancé is coming too, I asked, intrigued. Awesome, they chorused. It seemed that Ashley's partner would also be making an appearance. Speaking of which, I wondered if the rest of us had found our own partners. Listening to their conversation, our discussion naturally gravitated towards that topic. I noted. I'm still single, but Mitch, you're married, right? I inquired. Yes, that's correct, he confirmed. Mitch is married. The others exclaimed in surprise. Yeah, we kept things simple. We just registered our marriage and had a small gathering with our families, as we were both quite occupied with work, Mitch explained. I see, and you're wearing a wedding band, I observed. Indeed. Congratulations, my friend, they offered their well wishes. Thank you, Mitch responded. My friends were surprised to learn that I had tied the knot. Kevin was aware, as we had stayed in touch since high school, but I hadn't had the opportunity to share the news with the others due to our hectic lifestyles. Hearing the news, Ashley and her squad ambled over to join our talk. One of the nerds, it appears, had taken the leap into wedlock. Quite a feat for someone of that ilk, wouldn't you say? Marrying someone like him, what kind of person would choose that? She must have poor taste in partners. Probably an unfashionable woman who couldn't find anyone better than a nerd like him. Oblivious to our disapproving expressions, Ashley and her friends speculated and giggled about my wife. Certainly unattractive, they remarked. She must be a perfect match for a guy like you, a complete loser. Ashley laughed loudly, drawing everyone's attention while I struggled to suppress my anger. Being insulted about my kind and beloved girlfriend by someone like her was infuriating. Ashley, it seems you're having quite a lively time, Tyler said amidst the tense atmosphere. Ashley's much-discussed fiancé arrived. This is Tyler, my fiancé. He's a handsome, successful entrepreneur, Ashley said, clinging to her fiancé's arm. He was indeed handsome, dressed in an expensive-looking suit. Wait, that face. While everyone's attention was focused, I realized I knew him. Could it be Mitch? I now recall. You're Tyler? Oh, it was Tyler, the fiancé who recognized me first. Mitch, is that you? I asked. I'm grateful for your assistance, he spoke to me politely. Likewise, thank you, Tyler. I stood up and greeted him. I never imagined I'd encounter Mitch here. Look at that, you and my girlfriend are the same age. It's almost like we were meant to meet this way. You're absolutely right. The world can be quite small at times. Wait, hold on. Do you know this guy? Ashley asked Tyler as we chatted casually. Tyler's friendly expression quickly shifted to one of irritation when she called Mitch a nerd. What do you mean by that? Tyler said. What's the problem? It's just a fact. He's a nerd, that's all. Ashley whispered to the side. Don't say that. You're mocking Mitch. Why do you always look down on people? Tyler responded. Just answer my question. Mitch owns the property where my shop is located. He has a lot of real estate around here. Tyler revealed personal details about me. Turns out my family has money, and I own several properties myself. Running my own shop was a dream, but managing all those properties was challenging, so I rented them out. Tyler was one of the managers looking after one of my properties. He's a polite and earnest person, someone I trusted and heard was successful in business. No way. A nerd like him can't be a wealthy landowner, Ashley said, refusing to believe it even after Tyler's explanation. You only believe what benefits you, Tyler sighed, apologizing to me. Though he wasn't to blame, that's why I respected him. Hey, it does seem true, doesn't it? Ashley said, looking at us. Even if he has real estate, he's still an unattractive nerd. His wife must be unattractive too. Come on, show us your ugly wife who matches you. Tyler tried to stop her, but Ashley was out of control. I hesitated to approach this loud woman, but this could be a chance to challenge her assumptions. While I considered this, my wife, Kay, approached me. Apologies for the delay, she said, tapping my shoulder. Kay, you're here, I exclaimed joyfully. I got here early, Jess, she explained. I thought about waiting outside, but then I came in wearing sunglasses and a hat. Her slim silhouette made it clear she was no ordinary person. Seemingly unsatisfied with our relaxed chat, Ashley impatiently snatched Kay's hat and sunglasses, demanding, "Hey, show your face." "Whoa, it's that popular model, Claire, isn't it?" The crowd erupted in cheers as Kay's face was revealed. "Jess, this is my wife, Kay, who used to model under the name Claire. She was a well-known celebrity, often seen on TV, admired for her down-to-earth personality, healthy lifestyle, and great fashion sense, making her a regular on various shows. Nice to meet you. I'm Kay, the model known as Claire," she said, turning towards Ashley with a smile. "The real Claire. Incredible. I'm a fan. Can I get an autograph?" The crowd cheered as Kay made her appearance. Ashley was speechless and seemed stunned. "Ashley, it's been a while." "Do you remember me?" Kay asked, her smile still on her face. "What?" Ashley frowned, puzzled by the question. Her expression showed she didn't understand. "My maiden name is Parker," Kay continued. "Parker. Parker." Ashley seemed to recall. "The classmate you used to bully, forcing her to change schools?" "No way." Ashley's face grew paler as the memory came back to her. I remembered what Kay had told me before. We were in middle school together, and in the first year, Ashley had started bullying Kay. My personal belongings would frequently go missing. Every day, I faced baseless rumors about my parents being criminals or our family being poor. It was truly distressing. I recalled that Kay had struggled with these issues since middle school. She had a different appearance back then. Shorter, plumper, with acne and plain features. Sadly, she was constantly mocked and ridiculed by Ashley, who seemed to find satisfaction in putting her down. Unable to endure the daily taunts about her looks, Kay decided to transfer to another school before her second year of middle school. Even after Kay left, Ashley continued to bully others, perhaps feeling better about herself by asserting her perceived superiority over those she deemed inferior. Her unfounded confidence had only made her more arrogant, and she surrounded herself with followers and had her pick of boys. I've worked hard since then, determined to prove myself to you. At first, it didn't go well, but I persevered. Kay conveyed this message, but then she took it back, saying, "You're not even worth proving anything to." That was a mistake. Instead of her usual pleasant smile, Kay now looked down on Ashley with a derisive grin. "What do you mean by that?" Ashley asked. Kay firmly told her, "It's obvious you're hiding your rough skin under makeup. You might be spending money, but your unhealthy habits show in your body. Shapewear alone can't hide your figure well. Social media might showcase your glamorous life, but it's clear it's all superficial. The content is shallow." One critique after another followed, and indeed, they were all true. The crowd began to laugh, agreeing with Kay's assessment. Feeling looked down upon for the first time in her life, Ashley turned bright red with anger. "Don't mess with me. Stop it," she exclaimed. Seeing Ashley lunge at Kay, I instinctively moved to shield her. Right then, the sound of a camera shutter clicked. Noticed Kevin aiming his camera at Ashley's unsightly features. "What are you capturing on camera? Conduct yourself properly." As I and Tyler held back the still irritated Ashley, Kevin persisted in photographing her. "I'm an accomplished photographer, so I've captured the perfect shot." After completing his studies, Kevin chased his passion and became a renowned globe-trotting photographer. His photo books sell out rapidly. If you continue this, I'll post these images on your social media. The true face of the self-proclaimed beautiful celebrity. My pictures will surely grab everyone's attention. I don't mind. Go ahead, Claire, or whatever, and you, the property owner, get over yourselves and fail. I couldn't care less. Threatened by Kevin, Ashley hurled a final insult and left. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologized for the disturbance. Tyler apologized with an embarrassed look. Since he didn't seem to follow her, it was clear what would become of the two. The reunion ended prematurely, perhaps due to the awkwardness in the presence of the famous. Claire, did I go too far? Kay pondered on our way back. Not at all. I honestly felt refreshed. Really? But the reunion ended because of it. It's okay. The friends and I exchanged contacts and decided to have a mini reunion at Tyler's place. Then that's good. Yeah, and I was angry too for you being insulted. Thanks for speaking up for me. You're welcome. After getting out of the car, we walked hand in hand toward our home. I'd watched Kay smile beside me and remembered how we met. I'm Kay, new to your class starting today. Nice to meet you. Kay transferred to my middle school when we were in the 8th grade. I'm Mitch. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. You don't have your textbooks yet, right? Let's share during class. Thank you. We ended up sitting next to each other by chance, and I shared my textbook with her during class. That was the beginning, and slowly we started talking more and more. Gradually, we became closer and developed a good friendship. On the day of our graduation, we exchanged contact information and graduated. At that time, it was just a friendly relationship, and we naturally drifted apart. Welcome. Hello. I reunited with her when I opened my own cafe. Struggling with attracting customers to my startup cafe, I was at my wit's end. Are you Mitch by any chance? Oh, are you Kay? Kay came in as a customer at a time like that. Delighted by this unexpected reunion, we shared various stories with each other. By then, Kay had already started working as a model. She had grown taller, but was still full-figured and struggled with skin problems. After that, she became a regular in my cafe. I hope I'm not overstepping, but there are no customers right now. I'm actually concerned about the consistently empty cafe. Kay listened as I explained everything without holding back. Mitch, what is it? I might be able to help a little. Following her advice, I remodeled the cafe, and gradually more customers started coming in. I also began to worry about Kay's dietary habits. Knowing she couldn't cook and often ate carelessly, I started offering her healthy, vegetable-rich meals to help improve her diet. Hey, Mitch, I heard this kind of food is good. Yeah, I can make this. Let's try it together. We researched meals beneficial for beauty, and with her efforts, Kay rapidly became more beautiful. As a result, her modeling work increased, and she is now a popular model. We positively influenced each other, leading to success in our respective fields. Kay, you like this cat character too? Yes, I do. We had many common interests, and our hobbies matched. When we shared our past experiences, we realized we had both been harassed by the same person and sympathized with each other. Our relationship deepened, and after I asked her out, we started dating, leading to marriage a few years later. We still advise each other and live happily together. I think meeting Kay again that day was fate. Oh, why bring that up all of a sudden? Kay laughed happily at my words, likely feeling the same. It was a strange connection, both being harassed by the same person. But I wanted to cherish this bond. Holding her warm hand, I felt strongly about it. Afterward, Ashley's social media was being flamed. Kevin didn't post the photo after all, but the story of the reunion spread among other classmates. Well, insulting a popular model like Kay and antagonizing me and Kevin, both somewhat known in our industries, was bound to backfire. It was inevitable. Ashley, with her angry, almost demon-like expression, became an internet meme. She could no longer claim to be an influencer. Later, at a small reunion at Tyler's place, he shared the details. I broke up with Ashley. She didn't like it, but there were already things bothering me, so it was a good opportunity. That must have been tough for you, Tyler said. It's nothing compared to what you and Kay went through, I replied. Ashley remained unrepentant, always blaming Kay and me. I don't care about being a popular model and owning real estate. They are just a nerd and a fatso getting above their station. It's all their fault, not mine. Continuing to speak this way, Ashley exhausted Tyler's patience. Actually, I didn't upload the photo, but I did talk about the reunion in a recent interview, Kevin said with a mischievous grin. His photographs are especially popular among the wealthy. After the interview about the reunion, Ashley's patrons also drifted away, and she tearfully returned to her parents' home, never having worked before. What she plans to do now is anyone's guess. One can only hope her parents will re-educate her. Well, it's no longer our concern, I said. I guess that's right. Enough about that woman. Tell us more about your wife. Yeah, we really want to hear it. Okay, I will. Kay, my wife, became a bit of a topic when Ashley's social media blew up. She revealed that Ashley was a classmate of mine in high school and also went to the same middle school as Ashley. She hadn't spoken about the bullying she endured, but other classmates revealed it, and she garnered sympathy instead. Now she's even more popular as someone who overcame her past. I'd want to make a movie about Kay, I continued. A friend who is a director mentioned this in a film titled Becoming Claire. The popular model starring Kay herself was shot. The movie was a big hit, making Kay a well-known figure of the time. Meanwhile, my cafe is also doing well. After the movie revealed my existence, fans of Kay would ask, "Are you her husband?" I can't disclose personal information, I reply, though it's an open secret among the fans. Thanks to Kay's singing on social media, not to make a fuss, they warmly watch over us. Of course, there are also loyal fans of my specialty coffee, so I'm having fulfilling days. Welcome back, Kay. I'm home and weary. You did well today. Dinner will be ready soon. Appreciate it. Can't wait to eat. After a long day, Kay stops by the cafe once it's closed. I serve her a nutritious meal I made for her. Your cooking is always so tasty, she comments. It's better than any fancy restaurant. Seeing her happy face as she eats fills me with joy. I may never forget Ashley's actions, but I recognize they brought Kay and I closer together. I'm thankful for that. It seems every experience, both positive and negative, shapes our present. With that in mind, I smiled in response to Kay's cheerful laughter.
I'm not asking for a favor, Rachel, my dad said, his voice colder than I remembered. I'm asking you to do your job. The words stung more than I expected. For a moment, I couldn't respond. I sat there gripping the edge of my desk, staring at the man who hadn't been a part of my life for over 20 years. His expression was hard, his tone even harder, and I couldn't decide if it was anger or desperation I heard in his voice. My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 31 years old, a defense lawyer with a solid career, and a single woman focused on her work. For as long as I can remember, my relationship with my dad has been defined by his absence. He left when I was 9, walking away from my mom and me without so much as a goodbye. Now, 2 decades later, he was sitting across from me, asking for my help. No, kind of demanding it, and I didn't know how to feel. I leaned back in my chair, trying to steady my thoughts. "You're asking me to defend you in court," I said, keeping my voice even. "But let's not pretend this is just about me doing my job. You need my help, Dad. And after everything, you think you can just walk in here and demand it?" He shifted uncomfortably, but didn't look away. "This isn't personal, Rachel. It's business. And I wouldn't be here if I didn't think you were the best option." Business. Of course he would frame it that way. My dad had always been about transactions, what people could do for him, what he could get in return. Still, I couldn't ignore the flicker of something else in his voice. Was it guilt? Regret? I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to care. "I need to think about it," I said finally, my voice firmer than I felt. "If you'll excuse me, I have other clients waiting. He nodded stiffly and stood, smoothing his suit jacket. Take your time, he said, though his tone implied the opposite. But remember, Rachel, I'm fighting for my life here. As soon as he walked out, the tension in the room lingered. I stared at the empty chair he'd just vacated, my thoughts a mess. It wasn't the first time I'd faced a challenging case, but this wasn't just about legal strategy. This was him, the man who left my mom struggling to pay bills, who missed every milestone in my life, and who had been a ghost until now. That night, I called Jessica, my mentor and the closest thing I had to a maternal figure since my mom passed. He just showed up out of nowhere, Jess, I said, pacing my apartment. Like he had every right to ask me for help. No apology, no acknowledgement of what he did, just, I need you. Jessica sighed on the other end of the line. Rachel, this is tough, but you're a lawyer first. The question is, can you separate your personal feelings from the professional obligation? I stopped pacing and stared out the window at the city lights. I don't know, I admitted, but I'm not sure I have a choice. Over the next couple of days, I buried myself in the case file my dad had left behind. It was a mess. He was being accused of embezzling millions from his company, Monroe Investments, and the evidence wasn't exactly in his favor. Bank transfers, falsified reports, and discrepancies in financial records, it all pointed to him. If I took this case, I'd be fighting an uphill battle. But the more I read, the more something felt off. The transactions were too calculated, too clean for my dad. He'd always been impulsive, not the kind of man to pull off something this meticulous. That's when I started digging into his business partner, Alan Carter. His name popped up in a few key documents, and the more I looked, the more I realized he stood to gain if my dad took the fall. I wasn't sure what to do with that information yet, but it planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't ignore. Late one night, after hours of poring over documents, I called Jessica again. This case doesn't add up, I told her. I think someone set him up. Maybe his partner, Alan. Jessica was quiet for a moment before she replied, Rachel, if that's true, you're not just defending your father. You're exposing a deeper issue. Are you ready for what that means? I sighed, leaning back in my chair. I don't know if I'm ready, Jess, but I think I have to do this. The next morning, I made my decision. I called my dad and told him I'd take the case, but under one condition, I was running it my way. No interference, no half-truths. To my surprise, he agreed without argument, though I could hear the tension in his voice. Maybe he knew how serious this was, or maybe he realized he didn't have any other options. Preparing for the first hearing was overwhelming. I had to comb through years of financial records, interview employees, and piece together a narrative that didn't make my dad look like a criminal. All the while, I wrestled with my own feelings. Defending him wasn't just about the case. It felt like stepping into a minefield of unresolved anger and hurt. But I kept telling myself this wasn't personal. This was about doing my job and uncovering the truth. The first time we met in my office to prepare, the tension was thick. He sat across from me, his body language closed off, but his eyes occasionally softened when he thought I wasn't looking. I kept it professional, walking him through the strategy and what I needed from him. But at one point, he broke the silence. You're good at this, he said, almost reluctantly. I didn't expect this level of competence. I froze for a moment, unsure whether to take it as a compliment or an insult. I've been doing this for a long time, I replied evenly. It's what I do. He nodded but didn't say anything else, and just like that, we were back to business. As the weeks went by, the case started to come together, though not without its challenges. Alan Carter, my dad's business partner, was slippery. His deposition was filled with carefully worded statements that hinted at my dad's guilt, while conveniently glossing over his own involvement. I could feel the pressure mounting, both in the courtroom and in my personal life. One evening, after a particularly grueling day in court, I sat down with Jessica over coffee. He's not an easy client, I admitted. Half the time it feels like he's holding something back. The other half, he seems genuinely desperate. Jessica sipped her coffee thoughtfully. That's the thing about family, she said. They're not just clients. They're a mirror. Every conversation, every argument, it's all tangled up with years of history. But you're doing the right thing, Rachel. You're getting to the truth. Her words stayed with me as we moved closer to the trial date. The more I worked on the case, the more I realized how much was at stake, not just for my dad, but for me. This wasn't just about proving his innocence. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above the past and handle this with integrity. During one of our late-night meetings, the tension finally boiled over. We were reviewing a timeline of transactions when I noticed my dad staring out the window, his attention miles away. "Something on your mind?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. He hesitated, then shook his head. "Just thinking." I set my pen down and leaned back in my chair. "Thinking about what? How you ended up here? Or is it about how you left me and Mom when I was a kid?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't try to soften them. For a moment he looked taken aback, as if I'd hit a nerve he wasn't ready to acknowledge. "Rachel, he started, but I wasn't about to let him dodge this. "No," I interrupted. "We're not brushing past this. You walked out on us, and you never came back. Do you have any idea what that did to Mom? What it did to me? And now you show up in my life. Not to apologize, not to make amends, but because you need something. Do you even care?" His face tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might get defensive. But instead, he sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't have an excuse. I made mistakes, big ones. And the truth is, I didn't think I had the right to come back after everything." His admission caught me off guard. I had spent years imagining what I'd say to him if I ever got the chance, but I never expected him to admit fault so openly. "You didn't even try," I said, my voice trembling. "You left us to pick up the pieces." He nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on the window. "And I regret it every single day." I shook my head, trying to make sense of it all. "I don't understand why I took your case in the first place," I said, my voice laced with frustration. "After everything you've done, or really haven't done, why am I here helping you?" He paused, his gaze fixed on the papers scattered across the table. When he finally looked up, his expression was a mixture of regret and something that looked almost like admiration. "Maybe it's because you're a better person than I am," he said softly. I stared at him, taken aback. "That's not an answer," I snapped, though his words had thrown me off balance. "I'm not doing this out of kindness. I'm doing my job." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Maybe that's part of it. But the truth is, Rachel, you've got something I never had. Integrity. You could have walked away. You had every right to. But you didn't. Because you have something I lost a long time ago. You actually care about doing the right thing, even when it's hard." I leaned forward, narrowing my eyes. "No integrity? Are you saying you're guilty of this case too?" My voice was sharp, cutting through the tense silence. His expression hardened instantly. "No," he said firmly, shaking his head. "I didn't do what they're accusing me of, Rachel. I might have made bad decisions in my life, plenty of them, but I didn't steal from my own company. I'm not a thief." I studied him closely, trying to read his face. There was something about his tone, an edge of desperation, that made me believe him, at least in that moment. But the past had left me with too much doubt to fully trust him. "Then why does the evidence point straight to you?" I asked. "The transfers, the falsified records, all of it leads back to your name." "That's what I'm trying to figure out," he said, his voice rising with frustration. "And that's why I need you. Someone set me up, Rachel. I know how it looks, but I didn't do this." For a brief second, I felt a flicker of pity for him, but I wasn't about to let him off the hook that easily. "You better hope I can prove that," I said, standing up, "because if you're lying, I'm not going to cover for you." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the case, determined to uncover the truth. Alan Carter's name kept coming up in the records, his involvement just subtle enough to escape notice unless you were really looking. It was clear he had positioned himself to benefit from my dad's downfall, but I needed more than suspicions. I needed hard evidence. During one of our strategy meetings, I laid everything out on the table. Alan had access to the accounts, the records, everything, I explained, pointing to the timeline I'd constructed. He's been distancing himself from this company for months, quietly liquidating assets and transferring them to his private holdings. If we can prove he had motive and opportunity, we can shift the focus away from you. My dad listened intently, a rare moment of silence from a man who usually had something to say. "Do you really think he's behind all this?" he asked, his voice cautious. "I do," I replied. "But it's not about what I think, it's about what I can prove. And if Alan is as smart as he seems, he's covered his tracks well. It's going to take more than circumstantial evidence to clear your name." The turning point came during a pre-trial deposition. One of Alan Carter's employees, a senior manager named Ellen Price, was called in to provide testimony. At first, her answers were routine, calm, composed, and not particularly revealing. But as I pressed her about the financial discrepancies and Alan's involvement, I noticed her demeanor shift. She started glancing toward the door, her voice faltering ever so slightly. Finally, I decided to take a chance. "Ms. Price," I said, my tone firm but not accusatory, "is there anything you'd like to share about Mr. Carter's role in this situation? Anything you might have overheard or witnessed that could provide clarity?" She hesitated, visibly torn. The room was silent, save for the faint scratching of the court stenographer's pen. Then, with a deep breath, she said, "There was a phone call, a couple of months ago. I overheard Mr. Carter saying, 'Michael is the perfect scapegoat.'" Her words were barely above a whisper, but they hit like a thunderclap. I exchanged a quick glance with my co-counsel. "Did you report this at the time?" I asked. Ellen shook her head. "No, I didn't think it was my place, but it's been bothering me ever since. I didn't know if it was relevant until now." While her testimony was a crucial breakthrough, I knew it wasn't enough on its own. We needed something concrete, material proof to back her claims. Without it, Alan could easily argue that her account was hearsay or a misinterpretation. I thanked her for her honesty, promising to follow up. Later that evening, I went over the deposition with our IT investigator, who had been combing through digital records for weeks. "We're close," he said, his face illuminated by the glow of his laptop screen. "I've been sifting through old email archives, and there are still a few backup files I haven't finished scanning. If Alan left a trail, it's going to be in there." The waiting felt endless, but I held on to the hope that somewhere in the digital dust of Alan's emails was the proof we needed to expose the truth. 2 days later, just as I was beginning to lose hope, the call came. It was our IT investigator, his tone brimming with urgency. "Rachel, I found it," he said. I sat up straighter in my chair. "Found what?" "An email Alan sent to an external accountant," he explained. "It's vague, but he clearly references shifting the blame to your father. He deleted it, but the backup archives preserved a copy. The timestamp lines up perfectly with the period when the financial discrepancies started." My pulse quickened. "What exactly does it say?" He read it aloud. "The way things are structured, Michael will take the fall if this goes south. Keep everything tight on your end." He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "It's not just a mistake, Rachel. It's deliberate." I exhaled, relief washing over me. This is it. This is the proof we need. He wasn't done. I also cross-checked the IP address from which the email was sent. It matches Alan's office computer. There's no plausible way he can deny it came from him. I thanked him and hung up, staring at the notes on my desk. Between Ellen's testimony and this email, the puzzle pieces were finally coming together. I had the tools to not only clear my dad's name, but also bring Alan's deceit into the light. The next step was presenting it in court. As much as I wanted to celebrate the breakthrough, I knew the hardest part was still ahead. The day of the court presentation arrived, and the weight of the case pressed down on me as I walked into the courtroom. My dad sat next to me, uncharacteristically quiet, his face a mix of anxiety and anticipation. I placed the folder containing the email and deposition notes on the table in front of me, drawing a deep breath to steady myself. As the proceedings began, the opposing counsel tried to paint my dad as reckless and untrustworthy, a man whose carelessness had jeopardized his company. But I stayed calm, biding my time until it was my turn to present the evidence. When the judge called on me, I rose, holding the email copy in my hand. "Your Honor," I began, my voice steady, "we have new evidence that sheds light on this case. It directly implicates Alan Carter in a deliberate attempt to frame my client." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as I handed copies of the email to the judge and opposing counsel. "This email," I continued, "was retrieved from a backup server after Mr. Carter attempted to delete it. In it, he clearly outlines a plan to shift blame onto my client, Michael Monroe, should the financial discrepancies come under scrutiny." I let the room absorb the gravity of the evidence before adding, "Furthermore, we have corroborating testimony from an employee who overheard Mr. Carter referring to my client as the perfect scapegoat." The judge nodded, signaling for me to continue. "This isn't a case of negligence or incompetence on my client's part. This is a calculated effort by Mr. Carter to cover his tracks and deflect responsibility." For the first time during the trial, I saw Alan's composure crack. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing nervously at his attorney. My dad, on the other hand, looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years: respect. As the judge reviewed the evidence and listened to closing arguments, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. I kept my focus on the judge's expression, searching for any sign of where things might be headed. When the gavel finally struck, signaling an adjournment, I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "The court finds sufficient grounds to shift its focus to the allegations against Mr. Alan Carter," the judge declared. "The trial concerning Michael Monroe is adjourned indefinitely, pending further investigation of the new evidence provided." A wave of murmurs rippled through the room. My dad turned to me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he looked like he might say something, but he didn't. Instead, he simply nodded, as if acknowledging everything I'd done. In the days that followed, the charges against my dad were formally dismissed. The focus shifted entirely to Alan, who quickly found himself at the center of a full-blown investigation. The media caught wind of the story, and headlines about Alan's alleged misconduct dominated the news. For the first time, my dad was free of the cloud of suspicion that had hung over him for months. But for me, the victory felt complicated. Clearing his name had been my goal, but it also brought back memories and emotions I wasn't prepared to deal with. The evening after the charges were dismissed, my dad and I met in my office. He had asked for a meeting, his tone uncharacteristically soft when he called. As he walked in, I noticed how different he looked, less guarded, almost vulnerable. He took a seat across from me, the silence stretching as he seemed to search for the right words. "I wanted to thank you," he began, his voice low, "for everything you've done. I don't know if I deserve it, but I'm grateful." I leaned back, folding my arms. "You don't have to thank me. I did what I was supposed to do as your lawyer." He flinched slightly at my tone, but he nodded. "You were more than just my lawyer. You saved my life, Rachel. And you did it despite everything I put you through. I didn't deserve that kind of loyalty." I studied him for a moment, trying to gauge his sincerity. "It wasn't loyalty," I said finally. "It was about doing what was right. And honestly, it wasn't for you. It was for me. To prove that I could rise above all the things you failed to be." His shoulders slumped, the weight of my words settling over him. "I wish I could change the past," he said quietly. "I wish I'd been there for you and your mom, but I can't. All I can do is tell you how proud I am of the person you've become, even if I didn't have a hand in it." For a moment, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't expected. Sympathy. but it didn't erase the years of absence and pain. "I don't need your pride," I said, my voice steady. "I needed a father, and I didn't have one when it mattered most." He nodded, unable to argue. "I hope someday you'll find it in your heart to forgive me." I didn't respond, letting the silence speak for itself. I didn't forgive him. At least, not then. Maybe I never will. Some wounds run too deep, and no amount of apologies can erase the scars they leave behind. But as I sat there, watching my father grapple with the weight of his mistakes, I realized something important. I didn't need his approval or his pride. What I needed was to prove to myself that I could rise above the pain, the abandonment, and the doubt. And I had. I cleared his name, uncovered the truth, and showed him the person that I was. As he left my office that day, I stayed behind for a moment, letting the quiet settle around me. I wasn't the little girl he had walked away from anymore. I was Rachel Monroe, a woman who had fought for her own worth, and I felt proud of myself. Hey there! Did you like the story? If you did, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot and makes sure you won't miss out on more great stories we share here. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.